This is the Drive and Dish Podcast.
Oh, me, oh, my! A monster jam!
Talking about NBA news, stats, and fantasy.
Oh,
to start it off, it's Tim Tompkins and Kevin Rayfuse.
oh, he just sucked the gravity right out of the building!
Let's go.
I mean, I can't believe it's that time of year again already. We are 1 week away from the start of the NBA playoffs. Welcome to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Usually he sits to my left. Today he's behind the boards, my co-host Tim Tompkins. And usually we have keeping us honest, Justin Kuzar. As we know, he's usually behind the boards. Today he's out, unfortunately. He will not be joining us. So it's just Tim and I. Tim, what's going on, man?
Oh, I'm missing Justin.
Yeah, it's going to be weird. This is the first show we've had without Justin. He's definitely a vital part to our team. We're missing him for sure.
It's a backbone to the whole thing.
Yeah, somebody's got to keep. What do we say every week? He keeps us honest behind the boards, and today he's not keeping us honest. So you have the pressure on you. You have to co-host and keep us honest this week.
I think that we should trick our listeners.
Why would we do that?
A little bit of trickery is always good.
But what are we going to trick them about?
We could trick them into thinking that the New York Knicks are going to make the 8th seed.
We all know that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you never know.
Maybe some Knicks fans think that. James Dolan probably thinks that.
Sure.
But know what we are going to talk about on the show today? We are going to talk about LeBron James essentially conceding the MVP race and totally destroying my argument in the process. So thank you, King James.
Thank you.
And kind of going along with that, the Thunder have, they've been on the cusp for years. Is this year finally the year where they make the leap and break through? We'll talk about the Warriors, another team who had some finals expectations going into this year and are making the playoffs, but slipping a little bit down the stretch. We're going to talk about what that means. And we're going to talk about that Western Conference playoff race. We hit that last week, and it is still going down to the wire between the Mavericks, Grizzlies, and Suns. So we'll get into that a little bit. And while we're talking Mavericks, Rick Carlisle says Dirk Nowitzki is a top 12 player ever of all time. We're going to talk about where we think he ranks. And we're also going to talk about the Heat beating the Pacers last night, taking control of first place in the East again, and potentially having that home court, essentially being in that driver's seat. But first, let's get into some news. Why don't we kick things off with that?
Puts it up for the win! Yeah, baby!
Now on to NBA news on the Drive and Dish Podcast.
The New York Knicks are reportedly considering signing free agent Lamar Odom before the end of the regular season. Odom could sign a contract with the team option for next season, giving the Knicks the ability to monitor his conditioning moving forward. Mitch Kupchak agreed to a multi-year extension to remain general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers. Kupchak has been the GM of the Lakers since he succeeded Jerry West in 2000. Minnesota Timberwolves forward Dante Cunningham was arrested for a second time last week. He was taken into custody last Sunday on suspicion of terroristic threats, just 3 days after being arrested for allegedly strangling his girlfriend. The San Antonio Spurs clinched the number 1 seed in the Western Conference with a 112-104 win over the Phoenix Suns on Friday night. The Golden State Warriors also sealed a playoff spot after beating the Los Angeles Lakers on Friday night as well. Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash both made NBA history on the same night. Dirk passed Oscar Robinson to move into 10th all-time scoring, while Steve Nash passed Mark Jackson to grab 3rd place all-time on the assist list. Steve Nash now has 10,335 career assists.
Well, we talked about it in the intro, I guess, tricking them into thinking the Knicks are going to make the playoffs. And, this is awfully an interesting time to try to make a play at Lamar Odom with 3 games left in the season.
Well, I think there's also going to be a player option for Lamar Odom so that the Knicks have the ability to kind of monitor his progress over the summer and see how he's doing.
I guess if there's anyone that could kind of redeem Odom, it would be Phil Jackson, you'd think. Obviously they have that LA connection of won multiple championships together. Maybe this could be Lamar's last chance at really making an NBA run. It's kind of crazy how much he's dropped off over these past few years. I know he's been battling some drug problems, but he was a key part of those Lakers teams that won the titles in 2009 and 2010.
Yeah, he was. And earlier this year, he was playing for a Spanish club. He played there for 2 months until he was having some health issues, and then he went back to the States basically to get a second opinion. And during that time, that's when he saw Phil Jackson and kind of decided, nope, not going back to Spain.
He didn't really thrive in Spain like some of the other athletes did. Like Stephon Marbury is a god in China. They're building a statue of Stephon Marbury in China. Can you believe that?
No. Are you tricking our listeners again?
No, I'm really not tricking our listeners. He's won back-to-back Chinese Basketball League titles. After his, I don't know if you ever watched, he had the most interesting meltdown I've ever seen. He literally streamed for about 4 days straight. It was on Justin TV. And it was just a webcam of him in his house. And just, he did some wild things on that web stream. You should go look it up on YouTube. I mean, I'm not even kidding. He ate Vaseline. He said it was a home remedy. He was dancing to Drake when he first came out, and Ryan Leslie and all these other just random songs. And he just broke down and started crying. He got a car accident on camera. And, I guess Stephon Marbury, he's been the MVP in China. So I guess we should take it back to the States, talk about our own MVP race, where LeBron James earlier in the week essentially saying that Kevin Durant has been the most consistent. It wasn't quite an open concession, but I think LeBron essentially said that Kevin Durant should be the MVP this year, admitting something that I think everyone would agree with at this point, that Kevin Durant is indeed going to be the MVP this year, get his first one of those awards.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the thing about it, too, is that LeBron James had a chance to come back. And after he broke his nose, it seemed like all that momentum that he had just kind of started sputtering.
It really did. That was the first time. It's almost seemed like LeBron's been invincible. That game against the Thunder is when it's like, oh, he's mortal, he's bleeding. And he just went nuts that game. It was one of the better games he's played all season. Since then, he's had moments of that, but it seemed like LeBron is, kind of conserving himself a little bit. But in an MVP race, you don't have that luxury. But, I mean, he's obviously been playing a lot more minutes this season with Dwayne Wade limited. It seems like he turns it on for big games, and that he cranks up the intensity when he needs to. But Durant's just been so consistent this year. That's, he's absolutely right. Durant has been on a mission this year. And just for what he did for that Thunder team when Westbrook was out, I mean, they didn't lose a step. They're still the second seed in the West right now in a highly competitive conference at that.
They're on track to win 55 games. I mean, right now, Kevin Durant's averaging 32 points, 5.6 assists. Those are both career high marks, along with 7.6 rebounds and 1.3 steals per game. And he's doing all this while shooting 51% from the field and 40.5% from 3-point range.
Yeah.
I mean, those are numbers you can't really argue with. And the thing about LeBron James is everyone says he's invincible, but his PER has actually ticked down this year. His numbers have ticked down this year. And you got to start to wonder, is he starting to move past his prime?
I mean, a little. I think you can definitely wonder that. He is getting older. Kevin Durant is, I believe, 25 right now. I just think at this point you can't deny that Durant's had the better season. Do I think that Kevin Durant is a better player than LeBron James right now if I'm picking for one game? No, I'm not. I'm just not ready to do that yet. I still think LeBron is the best player in the league, but Kevin Durant this season has had the most value to his team. They've been, ravaged with injuries, and I know we can say that Wade's been hurt, but the Heat's injuries just haven't been nearly as much as the Thunder. The Thunder starting five has barely played together this season because it's been so injury-ridden. So I think just Durant's been that steady force, just keeping them balanced, keeping them going forward to the playoffs. And, maybe they think this is finally their year. They're 4-0 against the Spurs, the only team ahead of them right now. And obviously we saw them make the finals 2 years ago. It was the whole, young and experienced thing. The Heat just looked to have that veteran poise that the Thunder didn't have. Do we think this is finally the Thunder's year?
Yes. Their only main competition is the Spurs, in which they've swept the season series. And then their only other competition is the Clippers, and they just walloped on the Clippers.
I wouldn't say they walloped on the Clippers. I mean, they beat the Clippers, but it wasn't a blowout by any means.
Right, but they've swept the season series versus they've beaten the team above them and they've beaten the team below them. So at this point in the season, I just think that they're clear favorites to come out of the West.
Their athleticism gives the Spurs fits. That's the one thing that the Spurs just flat out can't run with them. They don't have somebody who can guard as dynamic of an athlete as Russell Westbrook. As good as Coach Popovich is and as good as the Spurs are, and they obviously can pretty much beat anyone. The 4-0 really stands out to me in this case, especially since 2 years ago, we saw the Thunder beat the Spurs in the Western Conference Finals, even after the Spurs took a 2-0 lead. The Thunder are healthy. The Thunder's defense is finally coming back. Thabo Cephalosha has been out for a lot of the season. He's easily their best perimeter defender. That's a huge addition come playoff time.
I actually kind of disagree with you on this. Derek Fisher right now, when he is in the lineup, he improves them to the third best defensive team in the league, only behind the Pacers and Chicago.
My only fear with Derek Fisher is what can he give you on offense at this point?
Well, right now he's shooting 42% from three, which is second only on the team to Caron Butler.
And Caron Butler's been a big, big waiver wire addition for them coming over from Milwaukee, adding that another veteran guy, another guy who can hit the long ball. I just think that starting five is clicking at the right time. Ibaka's been a rock all year like KD has. Kendrick Perkins is healthy, for better or for worse. He's been one of the more maligned players, to say the least. A lot of people wondering why the Thunder haven't used the amnesty clause on him, myself included, but that's a debate for another day. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, we've been talking about the Western Conference being a dogfight, especially at the top four with Houston and the Clippers also in the mix. I do think that the Thunder give the Spurs fits, and if I'm the Spurs, I'm praying that the Clippers or the Rockets, whoever ends up playing them and potentially in that second round, knocks them out. Durant is on a mission this year, it seems. This is the 1 year where he's ready. It seems ready to almost to make that leap into, I'm tired of being second best. I want to be mentioned in that best player conversation. He's going to win the MVP this year, in my opinion, like we've been talking about. And put it this way, I've never been a believer in the Thunder in the past. I didn't think they were ready yet. This is the first year that I really think they have a chance of winning the title. I still like the Spurs a little bit, despite that matchup. I just think there's such a bitter taste in their mouth after last year. And I think it could potentially be the Thunders in the years to come after that.
I'm not sure those old legs can hold up through 3 playoff series, to be honest with you.
But they've been strategically resting all year. Kawhi Leonard's been leading the squad in minutes.
Have you seen Kawhi Leonard play lately? He
awesome.
Is so good. If you could have Kawhi Leonard or Paul George right now, as how they're playing right now, who would you take?
I mean, realistically, I would still take Paul George because I think he's the better player. But if we're going off who's playing better right now, it's Kawhi Leonard. I mean, he was leading them in minutes during that win streak that just ended to the Thunder the other day.
I mean, just his hustle stats, the way that he jumps in and gets boards, and just the impact he makes offensively and defensively for the Spurs, I think is unmatched by any other player on that team.
He's just such a fundamentally sound player. He does everything you'd want him to. He does the dirty work. He dives after loose balls. He grabs boards. He's a consistent player. He's a workhorse. He's somebody that you can depend on. We've talked about the Spurs being so good for so long over, I think it's now 17-year stretch where they made the playoffs. I believe it's the second longest in major sports, only behind the Detroit Red Wings in the NHL, actually. They just clinched their 23rd straight playoff berth. Amazing stuff there. Mm-hmm. But that's for our hockey fans. That's for a whole other discussion.
The Spurs have also won 30 road games this year.
Exactly, which is huge. And I mean, Kawhi Leonard is the future for them, is what I'm saying. That's the guy that, Parker's still got a few years left in him, but as Duncan and Ginobili start to bow out, Kawhi Leonard's that guy that you can build around for the future.
Yeah, he's amazing. I absolutely love Kawhi Leonard.
And sticking in the ultra-competitive Western Conference, let's talk about the current 6th seed right now. They actually just clinched a playoff berth the other night, but they've been kind of stumbling down the stretch. Been a lot of drama going on there. It's the Golden State Warriors. They lost to Denver the other night on a Kenneth Faried buzzer beater. I guess what concerned me the most there is just that, what was most intimidating about playing the Warriors, besides the fact that their shooters can put themselves in any game essentially, is that playing at the Oracle and having to go to San Francisco to play the Golden State Warriors, that was a big-time home court advantage. One of those NBA home court advantages that actually means something, where the Warriors just are a dominant team at home. And they've seemed kind of disinterested recently. And there's been that whole drama we talked about, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where we talked about the whole rumors going with Mark Jackson potentially leaving because he wanted a better job, which I remember we were saying that I don't know where a better job would be right now. 2 assistant coaches have been reassigned since then. What do we think has been wrong with the Warriors?
Well, I'm not one to give out career advice, but I would say that if you're on the coaching staff for the Warriors, maybe it's around time you start updating that resume, update the LinkedIn a little bit.
Doesn't make sense. You think this is a young core that has finals expectations. And I know they've been battling some injuries this year. David Lee has been on and off, but their starting 5 can, score with anyone. How many starting 5s from top to bottom can we name in the league that are just flat out better than theirs?
Yeah, I would agree with you that there's not too many, but there obviously seems to be some issues going on with the coaching staff for the Warriors. And I wonder how much that is going to just play a role into, how far they go in the playoffs.
I watched the Golden State Denver game the other night.
And didn't they lose like a 20-point lead?
Steph Curry made a big shot at the end, too. Put them up by 1 point at the time until Faried, ran down the court and did his thing. But what concerned me the most is that Klay Thompson and Steph Curry just seem kind of disinterested. they're all the way down to the 6th seed in the West right now. That would put them in a first-round matchup with the Clippers. They're only a game and a half up on Dallas for 7. And instead of potentially making a run at 5 for Portland, where you get a much more favorable Houston matchup, I don't think anyone should want to play the Clippers first round.
Well, I think that they've split the season series. It's 2-2 right now. They actually play the Clippers fairly close. I think that if there's 3 players that need to step up for the Golden State Warriors, it's Harrison Barnes. Over his last 10 games, he's only put up 6 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. Klay Thompson has got to do more than just shoot threes. He also has to be a defensive presence. And Steph Curry as well. He can't just shoot. He also has to be there on the defensive end of the court.
How much do we think they're missing some of those bench contributions last year? Like a guy like Jarrett Jack, huge for them last year off the bench. Their second unit could score with anyone. And this year there just doesn't have to. It seems like it's a lot more on the starting lineup, and that's it.
Well, they brought in Steve Blake. They brought in Jordan Crawford. So they're aware of their bench deficiencies, and they have tried to, fix that by bringing in some of those other point guards and shooting guards and that kind of thing. But I think the biggest thing is that the Iguodala chemistry hasn't become what they thought it was going to be.
No, definitely not. And he's been battling some injuries of his own this season. He'll have to be a lot bigger for them come playoff time. I will say this, though. His crossover the other night on poor Quincy Miller was just disgusting.
Beautiful.
Oh, my God. I mean, that's some straight out of And One mixtape type crossover.
It's too bad he didn't make the shot.
But that's how you know it's a great crossover that's going to be played over and over and over again, when the fact that they lost that game and Iggy didn't make the shot, and still no one else is talking about that fact. They're only talking about that crossover. And the one thing I like, too, Quincy Miller being a really good sport about it. He was on Twitter just going, they got me. And he put a bunch of the emojis with the crying face out like you're laughing. It was so he's being a good sport about it, because that is going to be played over and over and over again. Now, sticking in the Western Conference, we've been talking about Golden State slipping down the rankings, and we've been kind of talking about the standings a little bit. Last week on the show, we highlighted the Dallas, Memphis, Phoenix playoff race. And there were 5 games left for most of the teams at the time when we talked last. And we're at the point now where we're 2 and 3 games left in the season.
And we thought it'd be wrapped up by now.
Thought it might be a little bit clearer.
A week since we recorded, and we thought we will have to know. We will have to at least have a clearer picture of who has this right now.
At least for one of them especially. Has that happened? No, it hasn't at all. It's been quite the opposite, actually. Currently, as it's standing right now, today is April 12th. Dallas is in 7th. They're 48 and 32. Memphis is a half game back. They're in 8th at 47 and 32. Phoenix, the same exact record as Memphis, losing on the tiebreaker. Obviously, they're the first out. Huge game tonight.
And by the time anybody listens to this, they're going to know the outcome. I do have some numbers for you, though, and for our listeners. If the Mavericks beat the Suns tonight, they'll clinch a playoff spot. If the Mavericks lose tonight to the Suns, they can still clinch a playoff spot with a win against the Grizzlies on Wednesday. If the Suns win tonight, they'll clinch a playoff spot with either a win over the Grizzlies or the Kings this coming week, or a Grizzlies loss to the Mavericks on Wednesday. And with the Grizzlies beating the Heat and the Sixers this last week, if they go 2-1 to finish the season, they're guaranteed a playoff spot since they own the tiebreaker against the Suns. So you cannot get any closer to finish out the regular season. There is no room for error by any of these teams. Basically, whoever wins 2 games makes it into the playoffs.
This is the playoffs before the playoffs. I mean,
yes.
This is, if you're a basketball fan, this is everything you could possibly ask for. And it's not like an Eastern Conference where it's 2 teams backing in. All 3 of these Western Conference teams are good.
Yeah, they're all very good.
I mean, it's crazy to think they can't quite get to 50, but there could be 49 win teams not making the playoffs. That's just mind-blowing.
Well, this is like that speech that I gave last week that everyone was so disinterested in. But whoever doesn't make the playoffs is going to be the best team that's never made the playoffs.
Well,
whoever it is.
Well, we're going to have to see. It's certainly going to play out. Dallas, obviously in the best position. I think they get in.
Yeah, they only need 1 game.
Yeah, Dallas has to split with Phoenix and Memphis, so it's pretty easy for them. There's the least that can happen to them.
And plus, they're playing Phoenix at home.
Right. Memphis has a game with the Lakers. That's their next game. And Phoenix ends with Sacramento. Mm-hmm. Now, they have to win those games. If you're a playoff team, you have to win those games. Sacramento and the Lakers just are not good teams this year. They're the 2nd and 3rd worst teams in the Western Conference.
And the thing about Sacramento being so bad is that still surprises me, because Sacramento has a starting lineup of Isaiah Thomas, DeMarcus Cousins, who might be the most underrated big man in the league, Rudy Gay. They have Derek Williams coming off the bench. I mean, they are a fantastic team. I don't understand why the Sacramento Kings have been so bad with a starting lineup that consists of those players.
Well, it's just been a mess, too. The whole ownership ownership situation's been a mess. There hasn't really been a steady coach there. It seems a general just kind of disinterest. I really like Isaiah Thomas a lot. DeMarcus Cousins is just so incredibly gifted. It's just that, he's a hothead. There's no other way to describe it. You don't know what's going to happen with DeMarcus Cousins.
But the numbers he's been putting up, it's just been fantastic.
Just filthy. I mean, he was on he was picked to the USA basketball, not the first team, obviously the Olympic team, but he was part of that second team. And there were coaches there was an inside source that says, listen, we would love to have him on the team. He just has to get it together. Mm-hmm. We talked about Rudy Gay a little bit. He's been playing a lot better since he got to Sacramento. Obviously, he's the scapegoat in Toronto since they're, all the way up to, they're down to fourth. Actually, Chicago just jumped them in the standings, but look at the run they went on as soon as they traded him.
Oh, yeah. They probably been the most untalked about team this year.
I would actually agree with that 100%. They're the 4 seed, could very well potentially be the 3, depending how these last few games go. They had a pretty good grip on it. Chicago, though, winners of 7 straight. I mean, can you believe that either?
Oh, beautiful.
Just Joakim Noah saying absolutely just no to the tank or any thought of that after Luol Deng gets traded. He's also just, his assist numbers are unbelievable.
Pass first big man. I mean, he reminds me a lot of Marc Gasol, where they run a lot of their offense through their center.
Yeah, absolutely. And both have that big time emphasis on defense. Marc Gasol, the reigning defensive player of the year. Joakim Noah, I mean, to me, the first team All-NBA center this year, the numbers just don't lie in this case, and just the pure impact. I mean, the fact that they're going to be the 3 seed without Derrick Rose, with Deng out the door, and they could potentially have the 6th man of the year, too, with Taj Gibson. Just incredible things going on there in Chicago right now.
Oh, it's hilarious. And, they were playing the Minnesota Timberwolves last week, and they were up by like 18 in the fourth quarter, and the Timberwolves took out all of their starters. Tom Thibodeau, nope, just played him.
Just a complete anti-tank. For everybody that's talking tanking in the NBA, Tom Thibodeau and Joakim Noah will not have it. Not in their house, not in their watch.
Up by 18 with a minute left. Nah, let's just keep the starters in.
They're the anti-Pacers, per se. Yeah. With the whole... How about that? That was quite the interesting fiasco with the I guess not a fiasco per se. They're starting the Pacers starting 5 has played more than double the minutes of any other collective starting 5 in the league. I believe Dallas is in second.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly. And the thing is, the Pacers just rested all of their starters against that the game that they were playing against the Bucks, and the Bucks still lost to the Pacers bench.
That's embarrassing.
I mean, I don't know. I've never seen anything like that before. And I thought it was a fantastic game. I got to watch Solomon Hill play. I got to watch Evan Turner actually do something.
It was close. I mean, Chris Copeland hit the buzzer beater. Mm-hmm. Who would have thought we'd say that this year? Chris Copeland hit a buzzer beater.
The Bucks could not beat Chris Copeland and Evan Turner, and that's embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, there's no other way around it. The Bucks, 15 wins right now. Amazing loss in that. I think the biggest loss in that Sixers 26-game losing streak is through all that. They lost 26 straight games, and they are not only not the worst team in the league, they have 2 games up on the Bucks.
2 games up on the Bucks. And, the Bucks were actually trying to be good. They got O.J. Mayo, they had Ersan Ilyasova. They just signed Larry Sanders to a big contract.
And that pretty much is between the injuries and the marijuana. It's been quite the interesting contract so far.
Well, I'm not going to hate on him for the smoking marijuana, but bringing it back to the Pacers. So the Pacers just lost home court advantage over the Heat in that loss the other night. Right now, there's the regular season is 2-2 split between the Pacers and the Heat. The number 1 seed faces Atlanta, and then probably the Nets or the Bulls, and then the number 2 seed is going to face the Bobcats and probably either the Raptors or the Wizards.
Well, it won't be the Raptors. The Raptors are pretty solid in that 4 right now. It would potentially be the Wizards. The Wizards currently have a 1-game lead on Charlotte for the 6th seed in the East right now. It's an interesting trade-off looking at the Eastern Conference because you want that home court. With the Miami and the Indiana series, the big theme throughout has been whoever has the home court wins. You want that Game 7 on your home floor. I don't think there's anyone that thinks that this Miami-Indiana series potentially is going to go any less than 5 or 6 games.
I also maybe am not sure that the way that the Pacers are playing right now, that they even make it out of the second round. I think that they were clear favorites to make it out of the second round before, but, with the way that they're playing now, I could easily see Brooklyn or Chicago or whoever they end up playing playing, taking them out in 5 games.
Well, that's the interesting trade-off. With Toronto dropping to 4 and not being in 3, there was a little bit of an advantage to being the 2 seed. No disrespect to Toronto, but you've seen proven playoff teams with Chicago and potentially Brooklyn. They have a lot of guys who have been around and done this before. Now, in the second round, if Chicago stays at the 3, there isn't that easy second round opponent. I mean, Indiana can't score right now. And Chicago, an equally as good defensive team, scoring's not their thing either. So you could see those games kind of, that could be a tight series. Offense will come at a premium in that series.
Reasonably tight and very unbearable to watch.
And with Miami and Brooklyn, Brooklyn's 4-0 against Miami this year.
They're 4-0, but 2 or 3 of those games were within 1 point.
Yeah, they've all been down to the wire. I mean, Dwayne Wade didn't play last game, but then on the Brooklyn side, you could say that Andre Blatch and Kevin Garnett didn't play either.
And now Dwayne Wade has missed 9 consecutive games. You got to wonder, is his injury actually a bit more serious than maybe the Heat are letting on?
I mean, I don't think the Heat don't win the title without Dwayne Wade. That's just a fact to me. Even if they come out of the East, I just don't think they'll have enough gas without Wade to beat a Thunder or beat a Clippers or beat a Spurs. I mean, Wade's going to be guns. The good thing with Miami potentially being the number 1 seed is a first-round matchup against Atlanta is kind of a joke. I mean, they're going to be able to cruise through Atlanta. Atlanta is
whoever plays Atlanta.
That's a gimme. Even Charlotte, if they're the 7, Charlotte's one of the better defensive teams in the league.
Charlotte's good. I love watching Charlotte play. I think they're very underrated.
Charlotte could steal a game or 2. Mm-hmm. You don't really see the Hawks stealing a game or 2.
I think that Charlotte might be able to take Indiana.
That's a very bold statement.
Well, with the way that they're playing right now, I mean, Indiana's playing terrible, and Charlotte's playing really good.
Charlotte's still, though, I mean, Charlotte's a game above 500 right now. Are we really going to wipe Indiana out? Indiana's got a great home court advantage, too. Indiana losing to Charlotte in the first round.
But how has Indiana been playing lately?
Horrible. But still, I don't see...
They've lost 9 of 14 games where Charlotte's been playing really well. I mean, right now, Charlotte is playing a lot better than Indiana is.
But the talent level's there. Indiana's been in the playoffs before. Charlotte's never made the playoffs before, with this, at least with this current collective. And I think, have they only made the playoffs twice in their franchise history?
Yeah, I think that this will be twice.
We've talked about Al Jefferson. I love the way Al Jefferson played. I think he's an all-NBA team caliber player. Not a first one, per se, but he could definitely be in the mix for second or third team. Great defensive team, will put a lot of pressure on Indiana's offense, which has been lackadaisical at times.
Yeah, by everybody across the board, too. And the thing about the Pacers is I think a lot of their issue actually comes down to their point guard. And everyone is saying, don't pile on to George Hill. The thing about George Hill is I kind of think he's too good to be on the bench, and he's not good enough to start. In that game that they lost against the Heat, he had 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 shots, 0 free throws. I mean, that is not the kind of production that you need to get out of your point guard.
They need to get more out of the starting point guard, especially since the Heat's point guard isn't their strong position either. They need to be taking advantage of matchups there. Mario Chalmers is a good point guard. He's not an elite point guard.
I've always kind of wondered what Mario Chalmers could do if he was on a different team. If he was the starting point guard, I don't know, for let's say the Bobcats, what could he do if he was playing 35 minutes tonight? Because I actually think that he'd probably be much more respected if he wasn't playing the way that the Heat play.
Well, it doesn't help either that he kind of has that, he always gets yelled at by LeBron and Dwayne Wade on the sidelines. Who are they always yelling at? Poor Mario Chalmers.
Right,
it seems like he's like the little brother of the team almost. So, I mean, that certainly doesn't help either. But Mario Chalmers is a big-time player. Mm-hmm. Look at the tournament game against Kansas in the championship. He had a huge shot to force overtime. Kansas ends up winning the national title. He's one of those, I kind of like to describe him a little bit as irrational confidence guys. He's really confident all the time, and he's not afraid to put up a shot whenever it needs to be.
He's a winner.
I'm not going to say he's going to shoot you out of games like maybe a Josh Smith could do, but he's one of those guys. I like Mario Chalmers. I think he's a solid point guard. It obviously you can't really measure how good someone is when you play with players as dynamic as LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, but
in the system that they play.
Yeah, I like Mario Chalmers. He's a solid point guard.
Also, I don't think that the Pacers are running a very effective pick and roll at the moment. They aren't passing well. They're being selfish players. And then also when they are finally making those, post-entry passes into Roy Hibbert, when he gets doubled, they aren't passing out, to their open guy at all right now either.
Hibbert's comment about being tired is very, very concerning, because we were talking about at the beginning of the season how Indy came out guns blazing. They were the hottest team in the league at one point. They were beating everybody. And Chris Bosh made a comment the other day saying, yeah, we're talking about, what this is. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. We're not worried about those first few games coming out of the stretch. How much do we think fatigue's going to play into this Indiana lineup? Like I said, they're starting 5 playing double the amount of minutes that any other team has played in the league.
Mm-hmm. And you almost wondered how that was going to affect them coming back and playing Miami. Were those starters going to show up and play? But as we all saw in the third quarter, when Miami took that 20-point lead, that their starters the rest didn't help.
And it's just their bench hasn't been nearly as consistent this year. Guys like Luis Scola, guys like Evan Turner that they brought in that they expected to make big time contributions off the bench just flat out haven't.
No, Evan Turner's played horrible. I think that he's been a parasite to the locker room as well. Well,
and just the biggest concern with Evan Turner in Philadelphia was that his defensive effort a lot of times was lackadaisical, and they took bad shots. Mm-hmm. That doesn't fit into Indy, where it's a much more,
Well, I would argue that right now everybody on Indy's taking bad shots.
Yeah, I mean, Paul George has been down. We talked about his struggles. We talked about Roy Hibbert being not quite the offensive presence that they need. It is curious that this is a bad time. This is not the time you want to be backing into the playoffs.
No, and they've been backing in for 2 months now, too. It's not just like a bad week or a bad 2 weeks. It's been 2 straight months of awful play by the Pacers.
And listen, the matchup, they have a great matchup against Miami. They match up very well. We've seen that over the past few years. But listen, you can't just get up for Miami. It's been essentially set in stone by every writer, including us, that it was going to be Indiana, Miami in the Eastern Conference Finals. We knew that at the end of last season, people were saying that. And I mean, I'm still on that bandwagon. I do think it's going to be. But there are more intriguing challenges in the East. You can't sleep on Brooklyn and Chicago right now.
No, you absolutely can't. But instead of piling on about how bad the Pacers have been, because we all know how bad they've been, why don't we talk about how great Dirk has been?
Dirk has just been phenomenal. I mean, you want to talk about last season, the Mavericks dealing with a lot of injuries, but Dirk is just leading the most wily cast of veterans. And I mean, they're, like I said, the destiny's in their own hands. They have to win 1 game out of 2 games left. Dirk seems like he's on a mission this year. He just is not ready to roll over and retire quite yet. And one of the things like that that we've been talking about is that Rick Carlisle says that Dirk is a top 12 player of all time. Mm-hmm. Now, he's using some interesting little statistics here, a little biased to say the least, I would say. And that Dirk has made 10 straight All-Star appearances and has a Finals MVP and has a NBA MVP. There's only 11 other players in the league who have done that. So that's where Rick Carlisle is saying, well, there's 11 players in the league who have done that. I think Dirk should be that 12th. Personally, I don't think Dirk's a top 12 player of all time. I think he's certainly in the top 25. I think you could argue top 20, maybe even a top 15.
Well, I think part of the reason why you could make that argument, Dirk's been a 10-time All-Star. This season, he started off in the 17th place in terms of all-time scoring. Right now, he's in 10th. But I think that most of all, he defined a stretch 4. I mean, he's a big man that can shoot, and there should be something that is said for people that define a position. And also bands that define, styles of music. Green Day basically inventing pop punk. I think the same thing that can be said for players when you have a big man that defined the stretch 4, that deserves its place in history.
Do you think he's the best international player ever?
I really have a soft spot in my heart for Steve Nash.
I mean, I'm taking Dirk over Steve Nash.
A lot of people could make that argument. I think some of that's going to come down to recency bias. But I'm in love with point guards. I've always really find myself enamored by people that can run an offense effectively. Steve Nash, I really like Steve Nash. I'm not going to argue that he's not the best international player ever, but I think a case could be made for Steve Nash.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not taking away from Steve Nash. I think you definitely can make an extremely strong case for Steve Nash. The 2 MVPs speak for itself. Dirk's longevity has been a little bit better. Definitely a much more effective player at this point than Steve Nash is. Dirk, has there been a championship year that has just totally redefined a player's legacy the way 2011 redefined Dirk? I mean, Dirk going into that year was pretty much known as a playoff failure. They had a 2-0 lead in 2006. They blew it. The following year, they were beat by the Warriors in one of the few 8-1 upsets that's ever happened in the NBA. Dirk was a habitual playoff choker. And then in 2011 goes out, beats the most talked about team potentially of all time. And I mean, totally redefines his legacy.
No, that was the great finals run. I remember that with very, very nice feelings. I enjoyed that whole thing. I think that did say a lot. And a lot of people are trying to take away that finals run, saying that it was a fluke that they beat Miami and all those things, when really they just had a team that was playing extremely well. And the biggest turnaround in that series was when they decided to start J.J. Barea. Who would have ever thought that starting J.J. Barea would have been the defining moment in a playoff series?
I mean, it really was. People forget about the fact that, Dirk, they lost the first game of that series. Dirk was huge in the second game of the series, brought them all the way back. It looked like they were going to go down 0-2. Dirk misses a buzzer beater in game 3. He had a 2-1 lead in that series and then never threatened again, essentially. Those last 3 games, they pretty much went out with a whimper.
Yep.
I mean, there's definitely something to be said that the Heat were in their first year of chemistry. I don't think that they were nearly as strong as the teams that won the championship titles. That doesn't take away from the Mavericks. The Mavericks still beat the MVP.
Yeah, no, all about it. That was a great series. So why don't we get into Grind My Gears?
All right, so we're going to talk about something that grinds my gears, and it's just kind of a politeness thing. If you hold a door for somebody, I want to thank you. And when people don't say thank you, that really bothers me. So why don't we get into it? I'm going to talk about why people just need to say thank you. Have a little courtesy.
Okay, let's get in it.
What grinds my gears?
All right, this week on Grind My Gears, we're going to talk about something that's just a matter of being polite, and that's holding a door, and I guess the etiquette that comes with holding a door. Now, I'm the type of person that always holds the door for someone. Even if they're coming from a little bit far away, you'll just hold the door. It's a nice thing to do. You just, it brightens everybody's day. It's a common, gentlemanly thing to do. Hold the door, people. But seriously, I don't ask for much. It's a good deed. I don't like being rewarded for good deeds. Like, it's just something you should do anyway. But I would appreciate a thank you or a head nod or something like that. There's always people that's just like, you hold the door and, it could be raining or you could be in the middle of something or holding a bag and they'll just plow through and just not even acknowledge you. It's like, seriously, I did something for you. I'm just holding the door open. It's a common thing. It's not like I'm doing something outlandish or something that's so minor, but you could at least say thank you. It's all we're looking for is a thank you. I always make a point that if somebody doesn't say thank you, I'd say you're welcome to make it as awkward as you possibly can and just make it super loud so that everybody sees that you're just a bad person because you didn't say thank you when you're holding the door. Seriously, people, if you hold the door, you should be doing it anyway. But if you go through somebody that's holding the door for you, say thank you. Do it for your friends, do it for your parents, and most importantly, do it for America.
Kevin, that really annoys me too. And I feel like, not to go on this tirade against women, because we've all broken hearts. We've all had our hearts broken. So, take a number, stand in line. But seriously, women, when you open a door for a woman, just say thank you.
Just in general, it's just be a nice person. Say thank you. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
I'm not asking for you to bow to me and, give me a curtsy or whatever.
You aren't hitting on them.
Yeah, just say thank you. Even give me a head nod or something.
Sure, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So the notes section this week, we'll get right into that. The Cavaliers will have 2 major players entering free agency this summer, Luol Deng and Spencer Hawes. Reports are that the Cavs want Spencer Hawes, but will only offer Deng a modest contract.
I mean, I don't think Deng's worked out the way they wanted to. The Cavs traded for Deng to make a playoff push. They are not going to make the playoffs. So why do you want to invest that much money in somebody to make you potentially mediocre? I think the Caps want to free up cap space as well. They have a ton of money. Mm-hmm. I still think in their mind that they can make a run at LeBron James.
And I think that Luol Deng also wants to play for a veteran, contending team.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on the cusp so many times in Chicago. It's just all those years, maybe even making a return to Chicago. That door, is always potentially open, but we'll see. As for Hawes, Hawes has been good for them.
Yeah, I think he's played really well.
It's been, when he was in Philly, it was a matter of consistency more than anything. But, he's been a good player for them. It's like, when Spencer Hawes got traded, I don't think anyone in Philly was like, man, he's a total waste of space. But, there could be a good signing for the Cavs. He's, everybody can use big man depth.
Absolutely. Speaking with the Cavs, Mike Brown said that the Cavs would like this year's number 1 pick, Anthony Bennett, to play in this upcoming summer league. You often actually don't see a whole lot of number 1 picks playing in the summer league. I didn't see, Kyrie Irving playing. And I have seen a few number 2 picks play in summer league. Derek Williams played for a number of years. I think that he's probably a little bit past that at this point in his career. But, how surprising is it to you that their number 1 pick, they're like, nope, summer league?
I mean, at the same time, with what he's given them this year, I mean, everybody's been talking about how just much of a disaster his start to the season was. He showed flashes at times. I think he just needs to work on his fitness a little more. I still think he's a little bit out of shape. Play in the summer league. I don't see why that should be such a mark of embarrassment. It's trying to refine your craft. It's trying to be a better NBA player. Anthony Bennett shouldn't want to be known as the biggest bust of all time. He needs to work on his game. Go to the summer league.
Yeah, I love the summer league too. It's one of my favorite parts of the summer and the
Everybody's
offseason.
Playing hard.
Yeah, really love it. I hope that this year in Orlando that it's an open summer league, kind of comparable to how they do in Vegas, though, so we can take a trip up there and possibly cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. Orlando only 2 hours away. I know our listeners, for those of you who don't know, we are based out of Jacksonville, Florida. So it'd be just a quick trip down 95 and then to I-4, which is the road, potentially the worst road in humanity.
Yeah,
it really is one of the worst roads I've ever driven on. And I've driven on Staten Island, and that says something when it's as bad as Staten Island.
You have mentioned that before. So the Minnesota Timberwolves small forward Corey Brewer scored a career-high 51 points against the Houston Rockets on 19 for 30 shooting.
I think there's 5 players in the league who have more than 50 points this year. LeBron James, you expect, Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony, and then Terrence Ross and Corey Brewer.
Now, Corey Brewer, I've probably watched 60 Minnesota Timberwolves games this year. Corey Brewer is not a good offensive player. He's not a good defensive player either, as much as people like to say, as he gambles way too much. But it blows my mind that Corey Brewer scored 51 points. And if you looked at the bucket chart, a lot of that was on actually really easy, around the rim shots. But Corey Brewer's defense, he wasn't brought on to be the small starting forward. He was brought in to be an energy off the bench guy. Then Chase Budinger went out with an injury to the knee, and he was thrust into a role that he wasn't prepared for and that the Timberwolves didn't want him to be in. Now, that being said, I cannot believe that he scored 51 points.
I mean, seriously, is there a more unlikely 50-point scorer?
He shoots like 30% from three.
The only other person that comes to mind, and I love this guy, I think he's a great NBA player over the years, but Andre Miller scored 52 points for the Trailblazers back in like 2009.
Andre Miller.
Just the most unlikely 50-point. I think when he was in Philly for those few years, I don't think he scored more than 30 points in a game and then just went off for 52.
Yeah, so the Timberwolves now, in the last few games, they've beaten the Houston Rockets, they've beaten the Spurs, and they've beaten the Heat. I mean, now to end the season, when they have nothing left to play for, all of a sudden they're playing really great basketball.
Yeah, it's a little too little too late. They're game over 500 now, and have no chance of catching Phoenix. Mathematically eliminated. Where was this all season? Kevin Love still hasn't made the playoffs. It's a big deal.
Lakers guard Xavier Henry is done for the rest of the season after having surgeries to repair tissues in his wrist and knee.
Is it fair to say that the biggest highlight of his season came in like the first game when he threw down that dunk?
Yeah, he had a really good season last year. I mean, wasn't he like number 6 pick a few years ago?
I think so, yeah. Definitely a high pick.
Yeah, a super high pick. And I mean, way to fizzle out into nowhere.
He's given the Lakers some quality minutes this year.
Yeah.
He's not totally, not living up to the billing of where he was picked maybe, but he's not a total, stiff.
Sure. To me, he kind of reminds me of somebody that just came from the D-League. But being a top 10 pick, I expected more.
Yeah, absolutely.
We mentioned this before, but Dwayne Wade sat out again during the Heat-Pacers game on Friday. So far, he's missed 29 games this season.
The Heat are not going to win the title without Dwayne Wade. I'll say that. I mean, I said it earlier in the show. I'll say it right now. If Dwayne Wade can't give them anything, the Heat aren't going to win the title this year. There's just too many good teams. It's too much fatigue adding up. I'm curious to see what the Heat know about how bad this injury actually is. This has been a lingering issue for a number of years now. And this year, there's been a lot of rest. And, like we said, you can blame a lot of that on the fatigue, but they need Dwayne Wade come playoff time. They can't ride the shoulders of LeBron James. Yeah,
I completely concur. Eric Gordon will undergo arthroscopic knee surgery. Obviously, he's out for the remainder of the season, as is Anthony Davis.
I mean, the Pelicans at this point, that Drew Holiday trade just could be looking a lot worse and worse. It's one thing to give up Nerlens, and people expect them to be kind of a playoff team, maybe a sleeper in the West. And when you're giving up a 14, 15, 16 overall pick, it doesn't look too bad. The Pelicans are 10th right now. If the draft was tomorrow, and there's a very good chance they could slip into that 9th spot, fall a game below the Cavs. I mean, that could be a disaster, giving up a 9th pick in a draft this loaded.
Yeah, I agree. And this reminds me of when 2 years ago, Eric Gordon was being when he tried to go get signed by the Phoenix Suns and the Pelicans offered that huge, or then the Hornets offered that huge offer sheet. And I just wonder how much that is coming back to haunt them.
Well, it's just Eric Gordon. It's just his whole career. It hasn't been healthy. And just that's been the story of the Pelicans this year has been, as great as Anthony Davis has looked at times, they've had consistent long-term injuries to Drew Holiday, to Ryan Anderson, to Eric Gordon.
Even Anthony Davis has been out.
Yeah, it's been a tough go for them this year, and hopefully for them they can get some health going next year and maybe contend for that sleeper spot that a lot of people thought they were going to get in at.
I agree. I even had him as one of my league pass teams, which is a big commitment going in when you only get to pick 5.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah, I was really enamored. I thought it was, you have a starting lineup of Drew Holiday, Eric Gordon, Anthony Davis, Tyreek Evans is going to be in there. I thought it was going to be a really good team.
I never quite got the Tyreek Evans signing when they had Drew Holiday and Eric Gordon.
I understood. I didn't understand why they paid him that much money.
Yeah, it was a lot of money for a position they already kind of had covered. I feel like the money could have been spent better elsewhere.
I think they were just tired of being bad.
Yeah, it could be one of those scenarios. We saw that attempted with Detroit this year. It didn't really end too well.
No, it did not.
Yeah, Joe Dumars stepping down now.
That's true. It's Detroit still blows my mind this year. I don't necessarily think this has been a disappointing season, but there have been a number of teams that I thought were going to be really, really good that just ended up being a sheer and utter disappointment. Thankfully, the Nets, who we're going to talk about them coming up, but the Nets turned their season around, so they weren't one of those teams that just failed miserably, to people's expectations.
I know we're talking about notes section right now, but who else isn't that disappointing? Besides, so we mentioned New Orleans. We said Brooklyn's not because they turned it around. Who else do you think is disappointing to you? You don't think there have been enough teams that were supposed to be really bad? Look at your Phoenix Suns. They're supposed to be terrible.
Yeah, no, there's been a few surprises, but, you had the Pelicans who were supposed to be really good. You had the Nets who were supposed to be really good and are now. The Timberwolves were supposed to be really good this year. Shoot, and I'm forgetting there was one more who I was really high on that just really, fell below expectations. And I was kind of looking for a better season from a lot of these teams.
Yeah, there's definitely some pretty big disappointments.
The Cavs
there
were supposed to be really good this year.
Yeah, really good. Were we gonna say they were really good?
I think that they were in line to be a pretty good team.
I think a playoff team, sure. Yeah. A really good team, we'll see.
It depends on your definition of really good.
Yeah.
Sticking with the Nets, though, forward Paul Pierce has now scored 25,000 career points.
He's been huge for them. Just in general, kind of keeping Brooklyn steady this year. But, Paul Pierce, 25,000 points, it says everything it needs to say right here. He's been a staple in Boston for years now, even in Brooklyn still. Paul Pierce has been the one player when they were talking about, that Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce trio and how quickly are they declining. He's been the one that's kind of been able to avoid that a little bit just because his shot is still as good as ever.
Well, he actually has a pretty high standard and deviation with the shot. But at the same time, part of what I think has made Paul Pierce able to maintain such a high level of play is he still continues to make the extra pass. And how important is that?
I think it just shows that Paul Pierce realizes his age and that he knows that he's not the number one option anymore like he was in Boston for so many years. I don't think he needs to be the number one option on that Brooklyn team. There's other guys you can go to. And I think that's been, not only the fact that he's been a good shooter still, but that he's been a consistent shooter. He's taking good shots. He's not just throwing them up there. I think that helps a little bit. That helps your longevity when you're not playing a stupid game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And last but not least, potential sixth man of the year, Jamal Crawford, returns to the court tonight, Saturday, for the Los Angeles Clippers.
Now you need him back. Hey, getting in for playoff times. We've seen Crawford hit big shots for them. And, any 3-point shooter is going to help come playoff time. He can provide that instant offense off the bench. I think that's only going to help the Clippers coming for playoff time. They need to be, ready to go at full strength if they're going to beat the Oklahoma Cities and the San Antonios of the Western Conference.
I agree. They just got Redick back. So thank you everybody so much for listening. This week we did it without Justin and it just was not the same, but thank you all for listening. Next week he will be back.
He will be back. Remember, you can always be one of those listeners. Hit that subscribe button on iTunes, the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. And you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Refuse to Lose. That's RAF, not Refuse. And you can follow Tim at Tim from Tucson. Hashtag DAD pod. We'll, listen to your comments, suggestions, show ideas, good, bad, ugly, whatever you got. We don't bite on Twitter. Respond to you a little bit. Use that hashtag DAD pod. Then we'll make sure we see it. Hit that blue subscribe button. You'll get all our episodes, midweek and regular, downloaded to your mobile device instantly. And, you get to hear us talk basketball every week. What could be better than that?
There's nothing I would like more. Also, there's a really good chance that come next week, we're going to have what they call a Facebook page.
A Facebook page.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. We are moving up into the 21st century. The Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Big things coming. So stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button, and we will talk to you all next week.
That's all. That's all.
That's all, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes by searching Drive and Dish. On Twitter, use the hashtag DADPod. You can find Kevin at Refuse to Lose, Justin at Jay Kuzart, and Tim at Tim from Tucson. We would like to thank Cox Media Group for allowing us to use their studio here in Jacksonville. We are in no way affiliated with the NBA, and any sound clips you heard on today's episode are copyright of their respective copyright owners. Go get them. We'll talk to you later. Until next time, toodaloo.